Custodian Calades Toravalia Kesh stood upon the bridge of a Cobra-class destroyer. Named Vigilant Flame, the warship belonged to the mighty battle fleet Solar. She lingered in the shadows at the back of the bridge, positioned at a spot where she could observe the actions of every crew member, be they in the instrumentation pits, at the armament shrines, or, in the case of Shipmaster Lethwick, stood ramrod straight before his command throne. It was to Lethwick's credit, Kesh reflected, that the man managed to attend to his duties without so much as looking around at the golden-armoured giant in the shadows. He was certainly nervous enough, despite his efforts to maintain a cool facade. Every man and woman present was similarly afflicted. Kesh could taste the subtle tang of adrenaline on the recycled air, feel the tympanies of their thumping hearts against her eardrums. They remained efficient, however, as one would expect from a crew judged worthy to form part of the Sol System's own patrol fleet. Kesh was exploiting that efficiency. She was willfully perverting the very selection processes intended to ensure only the most loyal, obedient, and resourceful crews were entrusted with the void-born defense of the throne world. Subterfuge was just another weapon with which she armed herself, the better to do her own duty. Indeed, Kesh mused, there was precious little in this galaxy that one of the Adeptus Custodes could not employ as a weapon at need. This thought, in turn, spawned another, and moved her to speak. "Shipmaster," she said. Though Kesh had not raised her voice, its rich contralto carried over the efficient chatter on the bridge, like a rumble of distant thunder across windswept grasslands. Silence fell, but for the binaric clatter of crew servitors and the tectonic throb of the Vigilant Flame's real space engines. "My lady?" asked Lethwick, keeping his eyes on his crew. Kesh noted the man's knuckles were white, where he clasped his hands behind his back. "What is the condition of the payload?" Lethwick did not respond at once. Instead, the shipmaster turned his stare upon an officer in a starched uniform, whose bionic eye connected via cabling to the cogitator at which she sat. Her fingers flew over her rune keys, and she muttered into her vox bead before reporting. "Classified munition remains stable, sir. Stasis field steady. Magos Kleist reports 0 energetic emissions escaping containment measures." "And the teleportarium?" Kesh asked, directing her question to the officer. The woman paled, but retained her composure as she called up fresh data streams with swift keystrokes. "Magos Kleist reports the device's machine spirits are in robust cola, my lady. Power well now 97% filled, levels still increasing within acceptable tolerances towards 100%. Kesh nodded, then dismissed the bridge crew from her thoughts. All was in readiness. The teleportarium, installed on the Vigilant Flame by Tech Magi, who the custodian had then quietly disposed of, would be her delivery mechanism. She would prime it with metaphysical coordinates and data clavices, so secret the High Lords of Terror were not cleared to know them. She would then command the ordnance, stolen from a secret armory of the esoteric, and unutterably lethal at great personal risk, be placed upon the teleportarium's dais. After that, it was a case of waiting for the crew of the Vigilant Flame to deliver her into strike range, then triggering the teleportation sequence. There were risks, unknowns even one of Kesh's puissance could not avoid. The esoteric layers of warding around her target were ancient, the truth of them long lost even to those who sheltered beneath their aegis. They might overmaster Kesh's codes, eradicating her ordnance during transit, or triggering it and killing everyone on the Vigilant Flame. Even should the payload materialize on target, There might be shielding and containment measures even Kesh was not privy to. There were secrets that only the Captain General knew. It was likely, Kesh mused, that there were even secrets he did not. Some knowledge now resided only within the memories of the master of mankind himself. Even before all that, there were tests of human will and ability to be passed or failed. She reflected, not for the first time, that it was strange to strive with all her superhuman ability and intellect to achieve a goal so utterly opposed to her life's purpose. None of that would stay her hand, of course. Such was the nature of duty. If all Kesh's plans came to fruition, in just over 3 Terran Standard hours, she would deposit a compact cyclonic warhead upon the polished floor of the Emperor's throne room. In theory, it would then detonate, annihilating the companions and the master of mankind in a single apocalyptic detonation. Most blood games involved more direct attempts at assassination or sabotage, of course. Custodians had crept into the palace under the cover of falsehoods, sent hired killers of every stripe to attempt the deed, had sought to compromise high adepts, once, notably, even an inquisitor, to act as tools. A few avant-garde individuals had even sought to sabotage the Golden Throne itself. All methods had to be attempted, no matter how esoteric or extreme. All defences had to be tested, into destruction if necessary. There was no sense in the custodians shying away from any line of attack, when the enemies of the Emperor would not. And there was a reason that Calades Toravalia Kesh had been chosen to run several blood games. She had a certain flair for the grandiose and unexpected. Over the next hour, the bloated orb of the throne world swelled in the forward vid screens. Clearance codes were demanded from fortifications hanging in the void, but of course, the crew of the Vigilant Flame possessed all the necessary passwords. Moreover, though they were repeatedly questioned over their unscheduled departure from their patrol route, the cover story Kesh furnished them with held up. They were transporting an attaché of House Helmore, come all the way from Necromunda at the summons of the Master of the Administratum. Said attaché wished to travel in this fashion to avoid both a recent threat of assassination by noble rivals and also an acquaintance to whom he owed significant gambling debts. Perfect data forgeries of the relevant authorization crests set the seal to the lie. The Vigilant Flame pressed on. Fields of void mines, miles-long eagle-headed orbital cannons, flights of deep void gunship patrols flocking from the launch decks of prowling carriers. The Vigilant Flame passed them all. At each potential check, Kesh sensed a taut expectancy in the bridge crew, and in their shipmaster in particular. Sweat beaded. Near imperceptible tremors ran through hands and voices. Gazes darted evasively about the bridge. Faithful and dutiful as they were, Kesh suspected at least some of these men and women hoped with each fresh interrogation that they would be found out. They did not want to follow her orders, for on some level they suspected them to be madness, even though they came from one of the Adeptus Custodes themselves. They wanted to deny her, but were caught in a vice. They hoped that the choice would be taken out of their hands, that someone else would release them. A half-hour later, the crew's wish was granted. Kesh was warned before anyone else aboard, sensing a sudden empiric energy spike coupled with the surge of overpressure and sharp temperature drop that presaged a teleport strike. Her guardian spear was levelled and armed before the first cry of alarm or howl of a klaxon rang through the bridge. Armoured shutters rattled down over exterior viewports, a futile gesture of warding against foes who had already boarded the very nerve centre of the ship. As the teleport flare faded and a quintet of hulking figures were revealed, Kesh found herself fixed firmly under the targeting reticules of several ballistic grenade launchers. Despite staring down enough firepower to tear even her jean-smithed body apart, she could not resist a wintry smile. "Shield Captain Nicodemus," she said, by way of a greeting. "Kesh, my friend," replied the golden-armoured, statuesque warrior, who stood flanked by 4 enormous Alaris custodians. His smile echoed Kesh's own. "It has been too long." 873 days, 16 hours and 9 minutes since this blood game commenced, said Kesh. "But now it is ended. I have another team deployed upon your teleportarium, disarming the munition as we speak." Nicodemus shook his head. "Throne, Kesh. An exterminatus-grade warhead? Hardly subtle." "But it could have proved effective," Kesh replied. The two of them sobered at the thought. "What alerted you?" Shield Captain Nicodemus swept his stern gaze across the quailing shipmaster to his ashen-faced crew. "Officer of Vox Erebator, make yourself known," he commanded. Unable to stop her traitorous body from shaking, jaw clenched tight, the officer with the ocular tether rose to her feet and gave an Aquila salute. "Officer Bator here believed it appropriate to ignore your request for absolute secrecy. She dispatched a coded distress call amidst her standard data missives, and we detected it." Shipmaster Lethwick choked in outrage. But before he could berate his rebellious officer, the shield captain pointed a finger at the man, menacing him to silence. "There are those who would call such disobedience to a custodian heresy," said Kesh slowly. "And yet, in this instance, unthinking capitulation risked infinitely greater evil." "Recommendations?" asked Nicodemus. "This crew has been found wanting," replied Kesh. "A sword that turns willingly upon its master offers no protection. But examples can be instructive. We shall hand the shipmaster over to the Adeptus Mechanicus. Let them make a servitor of him, if he wishes to serve so unthinkingly. Excoriation for the crew, then let them return with punitive status to their battle fleet, that they might spread the word of vigilance. As for Officer Bator, one hopes that she will captain this vessel in the future with the same courage and clarity of faith she has shown this day. The defense of the Golden Throne requires no less."